Stop for a moment, because what you're about to hear may completely change the way you see your connection with this person. There are moments in life when everything appears quiet on the outside. Yet behind the scenes, a decision has already been made. One so powerful that it has the potential to alter two lives forever. The strange part is that most people never recognize these moments while they're happening. They wait for obvious signs, dramatic messages, or undeniable proof, unaware that the deepest transformations always begin in silence. What if, at this very moment, the person you cannot stop thinking about has reached a turning point? What if the questions that kept them awake at night have finally found an answer? What if the walls built by fear, pride, and uncertainty have begun to crumble, making room for a truth they can no longer ignore? This isn't about fantasy or wishful thinking. It's about the hidden changes that take place within every human soul before any visible action occurs. The greatest decisions are never made in front of an audience. They're made in the quiet places where no one is watching. Stay with me until the very end, because what you're probably about to discover may reveal why everything is about to change in ways you never expected. There are moments in life when everything appears unchanged on the surface, yet beneath that calm exterior, an invisible transformation has already begun. Most people expect life-changing decisions to arrive with dramatic announcements, clear signs, or sudden actions. But the truth is that the most powerful choices are often made long before anyone else can see them. They're formed in silence, in private thoughts, during sleepless nights, and within the hidden conversations a person has with themselves. If your soulmate has recently made the biggest decision of their life, it's possible that this decision wasn't born in a single moment. It may have been developing quietly for weeks, months, or even years. Human beings spend much of their lives trying to avoid difficult truths. They distract themselves with routines, responsibilities, and temporary comforts. Yet there comes a point when the inner world can no longer remain ignored. What was once pushed aside begins to demand attention. Feelings that were suppressed begin to rise to the surface. Questions that were avoided return with greater intensity. In these moments, a person starts facing parts of themselves they can no longer escape. This process is rarely visible to others because it happens deep within the psyche. To the outside world, they may seem exactly the same. They may continue their daily life, speak the same words, and follow the same habits. But internally, a powerful shift is taking place. The soul has a remarkable way of guiding a person toward authenticity. When someone has been living in conflict with their true feelings, they often experience an increasing sense of discomfort. The life they once accepted no longer feels satisfying. The explanations they once believed no longer bring peace. A growing awareness begins to emerge, showing them what truly matters. This awareness isn't loud. It doesn't force itself into existence overnight. Instead, it slowly dissolves illusions and reveals deeper truths. The person begins to understand what they genuinely value, what they've lost, and what they can no longer continue pretending doesn't matter. This invisible shift often feels confusing because it challenges old beliefs and familiar patterns. The individual may resist it at first. Fear may encourage them to remain where they are. Pride may tell them to ignore their emotions. Logic may offer countless reasons to avoid change. Yet the deeper self continues speaking. It appears through intuition, recurring thoughts, meaningful memories, and an undeniable feeling that something important must be acknowledged. Over time, this inner voice becomes impossible to silence. Long before actions are taken in the physical world, a decision is frequently made in this hidden inner realm. It's the moment when a person finally stops running from the truth and begins accepting what their heart has known all along. Even if nothing has visibly changed yet, the direction of their life has already shifted. the seed of transformation has been planted. And once that seed exists, the future can never remain exactly the same. There comes a point in every emotional journey when the heart grows tired of carrying feelings in silence. For a long time, people can convince themselves that distance is enough to erase affection, that distractions will replace meaningful connections, or that time alone will weaken emotions that once felt overwhelming. They create explanations that seem reasonable and build walls that appear strong. They tell themselves they've moved on, that they no longer care, or that what they once felt belonged only to the past. Yet emotions that are deeply rooted rarely disappear simply because they're ignored. They remain beneath the surface, waiting for the moment when they can no longer be denied. Fear has a powerful influence over human behavior. It encourages people to protect themselves from disappointment, rejection, vulnerability, and uncertainty. Instead of expressing what they truly feel, they often hide behind silence or emotional distance. Pride reinforces this behavior by convincing them that showing love is a weakness, or that revealing their emotions will place them at a disadvantage. Together, fear and pride create an invisible barrier that keeps genuine feelings trapped inside. From the outside, everything may seem controlled, but internally, there's often an exhausting conflict between what the mind insists upon and what the heart continues to whisper. The heart, however, possesses a quiet persistence that cannot be measured by logic alone. It remembers moments that carried genuine meaning. It holds on to experiences that touched something deeper than ordinary attraction. It recognizes connections that changed the way a person sees themselves and the world around them. These memories aren't simply stored as thoughts. They become part of a person's emotional identity. That's why certain people remain unforgettable even after long periods of separation. The emotional bond continues to exist because it was never based only on circumstances. It became part of the inner landscape of the soul. As time passes, maintaining emotional resistance becomes increasingly difficult. The effort required to suppress authentic feelings begins to drain a person's energy. They may notice recurring dreams, unexpected memories, familiar places triggering powerful emotions, or an unexplainable sense that something important remains unfinished. These experiences slowly weaken the walls built by fear and pride. The heart doesn't argue with the mind through force. Instead, it patiently reveals the truth through repeated reminders that refuse to disappear. Eventually, there's a quiet moment of realization. It may arrive during complete solitude, in the middle of an ordinary day, or after witnessing something that unexpectedly awakens old emotions. In that instant, the excuses lose their strength. The stories created to avoid vulnerability begin to collapse. What once seemed impossible to admit suddenly becomes undeniable. The person recognizes that their deepest emotions have remained alive despite every attempt to silence them. They understand that pretending no longer brings peace, and resisting what feels true only creates greater inner conflict. This realization isn't driven by impulse, but by an acceptance that genuine feelings have endured every test of time, distance, uncertainty, and self-protection, revealing a truth that can no longer remain hidden within the depths of the heart. Distance is often misunderstood as the end of a connection, when in reality, it can become the very thing that reveals its true depth. When two people are constantly present in each other's lives, emotions can become mixed with routine expectations, misunderstandings, and distractions. Daily interactions may hide what's genuinely meaningful because the mind becomes accustomed to what it sees every day. It's only when that presence is removed that the heart begins to recognize what has been missing all along. Separation creates space, and within that space, clarity quietly begins to emerge. Many people believe that walking away from someone will automatically erase emotional attachment. They assume that new routines, busy schedules, and the passing of time will gradually replace what once felt important. At first, this belief may seem convincing. Life continues, responsibilities remain, and the world doesn't stop moving. Yet beneath the surface, something unexpected often begins to unfold. Without the constant noise of everyday interactions, the mind becomes quieter, allowing deeper emotions to rise into awareness. Memories that once seemed ordinary suddenly carry profound meaning. Conversations replay with new understanding. Moments that were overlooked begin to reveal the emotions hidden within them. Distance also removes many of the illusions that exist during emotional conflict. Pride loses much of its power when there's no one nearby to impress or resist. Arguments no longer dominate attention, and temporary frustrations begin to fade. What remains are the deeper questions that cannot be ignored. Was that connection truly meaningful? Was that person simply part of a chapter that is ended? Or were they someone who awakened a part of the self that no one else ever reached? These questions often arise not because someone chooses to think about them, but because silence naturally invites honest reflection. The absence of someone significant has a way of exposing emotional habits that once went unnoticed. A person may find themselves instinctively wanting to share good news, seek comfort during difficult moments, or remember how understood they felt in the presence of someone special. These reactions happen without planning or intention. They reveal that certain emotional bonds extend far beyond mere convenience or physical attraction. They become completely woven into the rhythms of everyday life, making their absence impossible to overlook. As this awareness continues to grow, people often begin looking back at their past actions through an entirely different perspective. They recognize the exact moments when fear caused them to remain silent, when pride prevented honest conversations, or when simple assumptions replaced genuine understanding. What once seemed fully justified may now appear as a missed opportunity. This growing clarity isn't meant to produce regret alone, but to awaken a much deeper emotional maturity. It encourages a person to understand themselves with greater depth and to acknowledge the true value of what they once took for granted. Distance, though often painful, serves as a quiet teacher. It strips away everyday distractions, softens emotional defenses, and invites an honest encounter with the truth hidden beneath daily life. In that quiet space, the heart gains the freedom to recognize what the noise of constant activity had concealed, allowing a person to finally understand which connections were temporary and which had become an enduring part of their inner world, impossible to replace or forget. Many people believe that love alone is enough to bring two people together. But a genuine connection requires something much deeper than fleeting emotion. Affection can create attraction, and longing can inspire hope. Yet lasting relationships are built upon deep inner transformation. Two people may care deeply for one another and still struggle to remain together if they're carrying the exact same fears, insecurities, or emotional wounds that first created distance between them. This is precisely why periods of separation are often far more meaningful than they appear on the surface. They aren't simply pauses in the story, but rather opportunities for profound personal growth that prepare each individual for a different kind of future. Transformation rarely happens inside a comfort zone. As long as life feels entirely familiar, people naturally tend to repeat the exact same patterns without ever questioning them. They react in predictable ways, make decisions based on old habits, and protect themselves using emotional defenses they developed long ago. These patterns can remain hidden for years because there's very little reason to challenge them. It's only when a meaningful connection changes or disappears that the inner world begins asking truly difficult questions. The sudden loss of certainty forces a person to examine themselves more honestly than ever before. In those quiet moments of reflection, people often begin noticing behaviors they once believed were completely normal. They may realize they avoided true vulnerability because they deeply feared rejection. They may recognize that pride prevented sincere conversations, or that unresolved pain caused them to push away the very connection they desired most. These discoveries aren't always comfortable to face. They require humility, patience, and the willingness to admit that some of life's greatest obstacles have existed within rather than outside. Although this realization can be painful, it also becomes the true beginning of genuine change. As self-awareness continues to grow, priorities naturally begin to shift. The things that once seemed important lose their influence over daily life. The constant need to prove oneself, to win every disagreement, or to appear emotionally untouchable slowly fades away. In its place comes a much deeper appreciation for honesty, compassion, emotional maturity, and authentic communication. A person starts understanding that real strength is never found in hiding feelings, but rather in expressing them with sincerity and personal responsibility. They become much less interested in protecting their image and far more committed to living in alignment with their deepest values. This inner transformation also completely changes the way a person views relationships. Instead of searching for someone to complete what feels missing inside, they begin cultivating wholeness within themselves. They learn to face loneliness without ever allowing it to define them. They discover true peace without depending entirely on external validation. As this emotional foundation becomes increasingly strong, love is no longer driven by the fear of loss or the desperate need for constant reassurance. It begins to grow from a place of freedom rather than emotional survival. When two individuals undergo this specific kind of personal evolution, their connection naturally changes along with them. Conversations become much more honest because neither person feels the same pressing need to hide behind old defenses. Trust becomes much easier because self-awareness replaces underlying insecurity. Compassion grows naturally because both understand the personal struggles that shaped each other. What once seemed impossible begins to feel entirely attainable. Not because circumstances suddenly become perfect, but because the people involved are no longer the exact same individuals they were before. The reunion that follows true transformation is never simply a return to the past. It marks the true beginning of an entirely new relationship built upon wisdom, emotional courage, mutual understanding, and the quiet strength that only genuine inner growth can create. The human mind continually seeks certainty. It analyzes situations, compares possibilities, calculates risks, and searches for logical explanations before making any important decision. While this ability is certainly valuable, it often struggles to understand experiences that arise from a much deeper place within. There are moments when a person cannot fully explain why they feel drawn towards someone, why certain encounters remain unforgettable, or why a connection continues to occupy their thoughts despite every single attempt to move forward. The mind may question these experiences, but something far beneath conscious reasoning continues to recognize their true significance. This deeper awareness speaks in wonderfully subtle ways. It rarely arrives as a loud command or a dramatic revelation. Instead, it appears through quiet intuition, recurring dreams, unexpected memories, meaningful coincidences, or an unshakable feeling that simply refuses to disappear. A person may dismiss these experiences at first, believing they're merely imagination or an old emotional habit. Yet the more they try to ignore them, the more persistent they often become. It's almost as though an unseen part of the self is gently inviting them to pay close attention to a truth they've been actively avoiding. The greatest challenge arises because the mind naturally resists uncertainty. It strongly prefers familiar routines over unknown possibilities. It constantly reminds a person of past disappointments, fears of rejection, and the potential consequences of vulnerability. Every painful experience from the past becomes evidence supporting caution in the present. As a result, the mind builds protective walls designed to prevent future suffering. These defenses may create temporary safety, but they can also prevent genuine emotional growth. When every single decision is controlled by fear, the heart has very little opportunity to express what it truly knows. Despite this stubborn resistance, the deeper self continues its quiet work. It doesn't demand immediate action or force any dramatic changes. Instead, it patiently reveals patterns that eventually become impossible to ignore. A person begins noticing how certain relationships leave them feeling empty, while one particular connection continues to awaken something meaningful inside them. They recognize that external success can never replace true inner fulfillment, and that avoiding their emotions has never brought lasting peace. Gradually, the conflict between logic and deeper awareness begins to soften. Over time, the mind starts accepting what it once rejected. It realizes that not every meaningful experience can be measured by hard evidence alone. Some truths are discovered only through honest reflection, emotional maturity, and the willingness to listen far beyond ordinary reasoning. When this happens, the person no longer feels divided between what they think they should do and what they deeply know to be right. Their thoughts and inner awareness begin moving in the exact same direction, allowing them to make choices that reflect not only careful judgment, but also the quiet wisdom that has been present within them from the very beginning.